The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it, weekend editions here. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We'll get Mark Kraynak in the fold here in a little bit. He is probably screaming at his computer, just a guess. So Kraynak going to be with us here in just a moment. Numbers to dial up, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Can email the show, Chris at hailvarsity.com. And we're up bright and early streaming this morning on ESPN Lincoln's Facebook, on ESPN Lincoln's Twitter, at ESPN Lincoln, also Hail Varsity Radio at HVarsity Radio's Twitter handle. Follow that. And locally, of course, weekday mornings, Coffee and Cream. Be sure to catch Damon Benning and Andrew Rogers, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday. One more option that's a great option is the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Check that out. You can watch the show that way. Elijah Herbel back in studio. I am at home. The pups are up. They're out. I kind of get a kick out of this. I get a cup of coffee going in the wee early hours of Saturday mornings for this weekend edition. We've been doing this thing since, I'd say 2010, and that was pre-pups. But, yeah, I like my cup of coffee, and I like to see the German rush up here to greet me. It's comforting. Pretty comforting week of Nebraska football, Elijah, and Mark Kraynak also joins us as Nebraska's coach is able to, get back out on the road with the recruiting world for 2024 and beyond, and then also kind of settle down with some in-state moments. Not only see some high schools and talk to some coaches, but also rub elbows with national championship winners, i.e. Coach Rule and Tom Osborne. We say hi to Mark Kraynak. Kraynak, what do you know? How you been, man?
Well, it's good to be here, and it's good to be covering a Nebraska program that has a plan. I don't know, the Frost group did too. We thought. Actually, we thought there would be a plan. Remember when he got here, it's just like, hey, it's good that at least now there's going to be a plan for everything, because Frost, being a really hard worker, Nebraska guy, former quarterback, he's been tutored by all the best coaches on the planet. There's going to be a plan for everything, at least.
He's seen the best do their thing. He'll have some sort of system in place to go get it done.
He's going to apply it, right? Like, he's going to serve the perfect kind of sandwiches, not just regular old sandwiches that other football teams do. Like, he's bringing in Dave Ellis for that, right? Like, but he turns out there really wasn't a plan for everything, and there was a little checking out going on. It seems, anyways. It seems.
Well, it feels like the plan was let's bring in some fast skill position players, and then the rest take care of itself. That seemed to be the plan.
Yeah, and then make the Big Ten adjust.
Yeah,
to that. Be like, haha, y'all, the Big Ten never thought about defending fast guys, did you? And they're like, yeah, actually we have. So next, anyways, it wasn't about Frost. What I'm impressed by so far. Now, you saw who Matt Rule hired this week, right? He hired essentially the CEO of the Texas High School Athletic Directors Association as
the governing body, Dr. Susan Elza.
And so, of course, the next natural question after that is like, well, what do they do? You're like, I don't know, dude. Like, what do
everything?
You mean? Organizes the schedule and plans strategically for the execute. Like, I don't know. It's behind the scenes stuff. It's not coaching, but it's part of the infrastructure. It's part of the overall apparatus. But what that signaled to me more than anything, and I think it's kind of the whole point, in addition to Garrett McGuire, the wide receivers coach, son of Joey McGuire, 23 years old, looking like Home Alone, and one other, Bob Wager, the tight ends coach, right? He's a known commodity of the high school. But the fact that they clearly have a plan to not just recruit Texas and say they're going to recruit Texas, because
they're going to go win Texas.
Right. Like, dude, they are planting a Nebraska flag flat in the middle of the state of Texas. Like, you know what I'm like? There's a difference between just saying, hey, we're going to talk to a couple guys and we hope they are like rolling up Joey Bosa style. You know, they are just like, bam, throwing that flag right into the turf, saying we are going to recruit the hell out of this place.
Well, have you seen?
And it's like, huh.
Have you seen what a recent strategy has been? I saw this on Twitter and I thought it was really interesting. You see the coaches, especially Coach Barthel, taking pictures wherever they're going of the high schools they're going and visiting. Have you seen they're leaving Husker stickers either stuck somewhere in the football offices or something like that of wherever they're recruiting, or somewhere in the main offices of the school they're at? And it's just that little thing of like brand recognition. We're going to leave that Husker N sitting right on the front window of the school office. And you know what? Every single kid's walking by is going to see the Nebraska N, and if they're not a football player, it's okay. Maybe they'll think about Nebraska for their academic career. But if they are a football player, they're going to see that N sitting there. I think it's a really cool strategy. And will the school eventually go take those N's down? Probably. But our kids going to see that first and see the block N and go, oh, Nebraska, they stopped by this school. That's pretty cool. I mean, it's one of those cool things I look at and I go, just brand building with Matt Rule and his staff. That's just getting the Husker name out there and kind of making people remember, the Husker N is still relevant nationwide. People see that N and they still think Nebraska. I think that's just a reminder from the coaching staff we've seen on the recruiting trail recently.
You're making high school administrators all over the country dust off their like defacing property policy. Like, is this qualified? Is there? Do we have to? This
is brilliant, and this is an old trick that was used in the 70s and 80s. You look at Nebraska's success down in New Orleans, right? The Neil Smiths of the world, okay, the Reggie Coopers, Leroy Etienne. Nebraska would always put up like a Husker Power poster in opposing high schools. They do it at Don Bosco in New Jersey. They do it at wherever Neil Smith came from in the is it the 5th Ward or the 8th Ward, that inner city region of New Orleans, San Diego or Los Angeles. You go into the East LA part where Ralph Brown and Lawrence Phillips came from, West Covina. I mean, you have Husker Power posters put up by some really truly legendary recruiting people in Nebraska's program. Jack Pierce, George Darlingtons of the world, Frank Solich's. I mean, 3 just killer recruiters. And, so this sticker is great. I love that, Elijah, with what they're doing. And no one's going to mess with it, Kraynak. It's going to be there, and it's going to be seen.
No one's going to mess with Nebraska anymore either because of it. 10 wins this year, thanks to the stickers. And we're not saying that. There's one thing about doing this show, and you all do it a lot more, obviously, during the week, where it's just like, as you comment and observe the things that they're doing, it almost invariably can just come across as hype or as though it's going to work. Nobody's saying that. I always feel compelled to like give that disclaimer of just say, like Nebraska staking their flag in the state of Texas. Like they're really doing that in a much more pronounced way than we've seen out of any of these staffs that have come through the doors in the last 20 years. They are like, they're all in on recruiting Texas. Will that matter? hopefully, right? Like you hope
it does matter.
Elijah, like Elijah's like, look at this cool little touch that they're leaving sick. They're like branding Nebraska all over the country, and I could just what we've all been through the last 20 years. I could just see people driving, rolling their eyes, like, oh god, here comes the hype train again. It's like, look, we don't know if it's going to work, but
we just know what they're doing
and reporting on the things that are different and like where they're taking things. They're taking things in a much different direction. And dude, that's another. They cleaned house pretty well. I'm not saying I agree with that either, but like we had talked to Gary Sharp a couple weeks ago. Like, wow, look, Kenny Wilhite's still on the staff, and nope, he gone. You know, and that's former Husker, and he had a good reputation, good guy. That's another thing I'm kind of noticing with this staff is I don't think people are as up in arms about it. I think Rule is truly being given free reign to kind of just do what you got to do.
To drain the swamp, if you will?
Well, right?
Wow.
But you don't want to equate. I know what you're saying, Elijah. You don't want to equate, like, there's nothing. Kenny Wilhite's great dude, great employee.
Yeah.
He'll land on his feet. He could absolutely stay within this staff and do a great job.
Well, I'm not saying there aren't any great animals within a swamp. There's a lot of great animals in the swamp.
Dude, it's not the swamp. It's just a shift. A shift in philosophy. Have you worked with me? Do you believe the same things I believe? Good. We're on the same page. There's less energy and time spent teaching. You know it. You've worked for me or played for me. Here you go. Here's your office. I mean, that's just how it is. And a lot of folks in the athletic or corporate world do the same thing, where you take over something, you're going to bring in people you know can thrive versus hoping that they adapt to your vision and philosophy.
Speaking of, terrible analogies, he spent a lot of time in Waco, and he's very much into true believers.
No.
That became obvious in all seriousness, though. What you've heard from the coaches so far, like they're believers in some Matt Rule. You know, like they are like, oh, yeah, this dude's got, Matt Rule. He is the guy. I don't think you heard that. I don't know. You heard that some with Bo, I think. I don't think you heard that a ton with Callahan. You didn't hear that much with Mike Riley. You sort of heard that in pockets with Frost. But, like, these guys go out of their way to basically pay tribute to Rule's greatness. Like they really do.
There's loyalty. Big-time built-up loyalty.
Yeah, and that's a trait of, Waco's known for that sort of thing. And so that's...
I'm not going to make the joke I was going
there.
Yeah.
Swamp and Branch Davidians. Like, what are we talking
Kraynak, let's shift here a minute, partner.
Schmidt's like, let's change topics. Let's get out now.
we're gonna just move and stay with football. But I'm interested here with the salaries here, and what do you think of that? We haven't talked to you in a little while, and we heard from Evan Cooper and Barthel, and they reiterated, why they have moved on in their careers to come back to Rule, either from a past coaching relationship or playing for the guy. And it really is genuine. It is very genuine about why they click with Coach Rule so much and believe that he's going to get it handled. Because of his intelligence, his work ethic, and then the eye for talent, and then that drive to develop, right? So you heard from those two. And you've got the two coordinators that are making coordinator money, but everyone else it's kind of measured, honestly. I mean, it's a little bit measured with what you're getting paid to coach the defensive line, or what you're making in the secondary isn't exorbitant. You don't know the wide receiver number for Garrett. We've been kind of chuckling all week what we would have done with a six-figure salary when we're 24 years old.
Oh, geez.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
But,
that wouldn't have been good.
It's well within reason the numbers and money being spent right now. And he's pooling a lot to have this support staff, which is what we started this conversation with Elza coming in and her background and connections. I mean, you want to talk about thoroughly planned, this Nebraska takeover has been.
Yeah, so in those, a lot of the salaries on 8 of the 10 staff members come out yesterday, right? And $1.4 million from Marcus Satterfield. Let's just give you the range here. 1.4 for Marcus Satterfield as the offensive coordinator. That's legit. That is like as competitive as I think you'll find nationwide.
Well, that makes him, I believe, the highest paid assistant in Husker history. I believe. I could be wrong on my number there, but
no, it does.
I don't think anybody's gotten into 7 figures before him. So yeah, that would stand to reason. And then all the way down to $285,000, all the way down. That's a pretty penny. I realize that. $285,000 for E.J. Barthel, the running backs coach, which that also surprised me a little bit. I'm like, hey, if I'm EJ, I'm sitting here like, whoa, hey.
I think that shows that him, and then you also look at Raiola at 325, and both those guys on prove-it contracts, and I think that stands to reason with what their history is. Is Barthel's never had real Power 5 experience like this. He was recently at UConn. It's a big step up for him, and with Raiola as well, it's a guy that Rule's not as comfortable with, but it's a guy that he was sold on throughout this process. So you're going to put both those guys on prove-it contracts early and say, you know what? You want to make more like these other guys on staff? Prove it while you're on my staff right now as a position coach. These other guys have been position coaches for me before, and or they're with me in Carolina, and I trust them. Prove it right now to me. You got a year or two, and then we can talk about the higher numbers, which I think is really reasonable to do with your assistants. And the fact that you found assistants that are willing to do that, even at a place like Nebraska, I think speaks to the loyalty around the country to these coaches to Rule.
And I think we know, too, $285,000 a year in Lincoln, Nebraska will take you pretty damn far, right? Those guys are okay. They're not going to have to be subsisting off of saltine crackers or anything. They're going to be just fine. As opposed to, say, you're in L.A. paying somebody $285 a year, you might be like, well, hey, Coach Riley, I don't know if this is going to.
I need a roommate.
I don't know if this is going to work out. I need more than a studio apartment, in a shady part of town. Like it would be a tougher sell for them. So that's your range, 285 all the way up to 1.4. The 1.4 makes me cock my head a little bit. I'm like, only because is Satterfield that proven? Right? I think that's money for like, a dude that has invented a new offense, and is got a huge track record. I wouldn't say Satterfield has that. I think he's a very competent coach. I think he has a good resume. I think he's had moments of brilliance. But I don't see him as an elite level coordinator yet. Prove me wrong, but just look at his track record. You can't say that, he's some sort of can't miss.
He's not a
whole world
burgeoning,
after, right?
He's not a burgeoning Chip Kelly under Mike Bellotti type. Here's $1.4 million, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's right. And the thing with Satterfield is, I think he is pretty committed to. This is what he's telling us anyway. Is committed to the run. Obviously wants to be ground and pound, but he's also committed to an offense that can and will use a mobile quarterback, but still have the pro elements where you huddle and it is I formation. So they can do a lot of things on offense, but the way he ended on offense is a great showcase of once things settle in, guys get healthy or stay healthy, and the talent peaks. Look how they wrapped the season, almost beating Notre Dame with that offense and that lineup, South Carolina, whacking Clemson 31-30, and then dismantling Tennessee that everyone was a playoff team, and it was super impressive. I mean, almost 65 points put up on Tennessee. So when it's rolling, when it's hot, it's pretty awesome, and you hope to see that in Lincoln for sure, in Boulder for sure, in Minnesota.
Well, and can I just add to that? I also just look around how college football is moving, and a Power 5 spot, especially at a place like Nebraska, it almost feels like at this point in 2023, $1 million's the floor with how much your coordinator going to be making at a place like Nebraska. $1 million's the floor. And whenever you look at Satterfield staying loyal to Rule, I mean, he was at a good spot in South Carolina. He most likely had another year with Rattler. He didn't have to leave, but he's showing his loyalty to Rule, and Rule's going to show loyalty back to him and say, you followed me everywhere I've gone. Now I'm getting back into college football. You're leaving a good spot that you've got in South Carolina. I'm going to reward you, and you know what? You're going to be my number 2 here based on salary. You're going to be my number 2. You're going to have more responsibilities and probably just being an offensive coordinator. We're going to pay you for that. And you know what? Whenever this thing gets rolling, we want to have a salary that is going to keep you from trying to go take your own head gig somewhere else. I'm not going to stop you from doing it, but I'm going to make sure that you know that I think you being here with me is your best option. So you look at 1.4, and it's not crazy. $1 million for your defensive coordinator, a guy in Tony White that's done really well at Syracuse for the past couple years. I don't want to say it feels like a deal because I don't think anything's a deal for $1 million, but I do lean more on the side of that's Nebraska friendly more than it is Tony White friendly. $1 million for your defensive core. I mean, that's the same as Eric Chenander, and I think Tony White comes in probably as a more proven defensive coordinator based on what he's done at Syracuse than Eric Chenander. So you look at that and you go, yeah, if you got him for $1 million, which feels like your baseline, what you need to do for your coordinator at a place like Nebraska, 1.4, then you say, well, okay, I mean, maybe Satterfield, with his history and loyalty with Rule, does deserve $1.4 million. I don't think it's a crazy number for your offensive coordinator.
Probably not.
It isn't.
Yeah, it's probably not. Did you see what Mitch Sherman? The rumors had been out there, but did you see what he put out there last night on Twitter about Zavier Betts?
Yes. We talked a little bit about Betts yesterday, and we will hit this now, and next hour we'll get Brandon Vogel and Gary Sharp's take. Here's what I believe to be true with...
And Mitch is basically confirming that Betts is coming back.
Yeah.
Right? That's what he put out there. Yeah.
I think you have to look at this with Betts and Rule and Nebraska's new staff. I believe that there's been a couple of meetings. All right, I think there's probably quite a bit of emotion involved in it. And if you're Betts, think about your last almost year, okay? What has life been for you, and what has life been for you without college or football? And I don't know if he's been taking courses online, so I don't know. I just know that those are some questions moving forward. Do you scholarship him? Is he academically eligible? And what are the steps that he needs to do to physically get ready to be back into winter conditioning and beyond for spring ball? Everyone's on the same page trying to learn the new rule system on offense, or at least Satterfield's stuff. And then your locker room, right? What type of reception do you get coming back? I am all for Betts coming back. I think a lot of Nebraska fans are, but it's a pretty unique situation here. I think Nebraska and Rule's done everything they can to try and hold that door open for him to make him feel welcome to come back.
And do we actually think that this could be a walk-on? Because I don't think it could be. I think Betts comes right back in and maybe it's not a scholarship right away. Maybe it's, hey, this first semester you're paying your way through school, but then once we get to the fall, if you're still on the team, you're going to have a scholarship. Because it's not like Nebraska was the only school that was in on Zavier Betts. Zavier Betts is a great talent. He's proven it on a college football field. And when he entered his name back in the portal, it's not like Nebraska was the only school that was in on a kid like Zavier Betts. Sure. I think in order for Nebraska to be competitive, in order to get him back, I don't think you could have gone on this and say, all right, but you're going to be a walk-on here. I think he would have picked another school, and I could be completely off on this. Maybe he likes Nebraska. Maybe he wants to stay close to home. I don't know, but just my reading of the tea leaves is I don't think he would come back to Nebraska if there wasn't a scholarship on the table for him, just because look at the talent, look at the speed. As soon as he enters his name back in the portal, someone around the country is going to be sniffing around going, that's great talent. Pitt could be the name. Somebody around the country is going to look around and say, look what this guy did on a football field. We can get this guy now. We can get, I mean, when you look at the transfer portal, what it is it's like a yard sale at times where you go, you're picking up somebody else's junk, and you've gotten this Ferrari in Zavier Betts at the yard sale. Somebody's going to offer a scholarship for that. So I don't think it would be possible for Nebraska to have gotten this without putting a scholarship on the table. I could be wrong there. I don't know. No inside knowledge from me, but just trying to look at it analytically and thinking about the talent that Betts is, I don't think he would have come back to Nebraska if it was just a walk-on offer. I feel like there's got to be a scholarship there, and with the talent that he has and with what he's already shown in a college football field, I think he probably deserves a scholarship.
And with Betts too, guys, I think, it's not just going to be, hey, welcome back, here's your helmet. I think there's some things he's got to do. We touched on academics, right?
We left everything here for you. It's just right here.
Your locker room's still set up just how you left it.
The locker's not been touched, I promise you. We might have to dust a little bit, but...
Coach, I ate a few more Cheetos. The pants are not going to fit. I need a bigger size.
Red Wine 65 says a good solid string of receptions will do wonders for Betts. Good take there. Now, it's not just going to be seamless. There's going to be a process and some work that the Betts has to do as well.
It's a welcome look. Out of all the people, Nebraska's been very transient. The roster has been for years now. That I would put him in my top 3 of no, come on, not Betts, right? Like
him and Hausman are the 2 for me.
Yeah, Hausman's up there now, and of course Wandale is up there. Where you're like, oh no, in terms of sheer ability, yeah, I think we know Betts is different. Well, once he hits that 5th gear, see ya. That dude's out. Like Sammy Watkins style back in the day, where it's just like he has a different pull away gear. And the
same style where they both glide. They don't even look like they're moving that fast, but then they're just moving away from everybody. You go, wow.
Yeah, he is ridiculously talented. And so if he could get put into the right kind of system, and look, the other thing you hear about Rule and that the coaches keep emphasizing is that, no, we are going to really care about our players. And that's not just lip service. Like, that's what we do. E.J. Barthel was getting emotional talking about his running back room back at UConn because he clearly established a true connection with those guys. And from what you hear, Betts kind of needs that, right? Like, he needs maybe a little extra attention that some other dudes don't, right? Not that he's, not that that's a detriment of his or a bad characteristic. It's just some dudes need more structure and care and attention than others. Others are self-starters. Amir Abdullah was going to work out 8 hours a day no matter what, right? Like, that dude, that's just how he's built. Not everybody's built like that, right? So if you could tap into him, help him reach his potential, yeah, Nebraska just essentially signed a 4-star / borderline 5-star talent, by getting Betts back into the fold. And that's according to Mitch Sherman. It's not official yet. We don't know, but Mitch doesn't put that out there willy-nilly either.
And it's going to be the first real big test for Coach McGuire, too, a 24-year-old. Now you've got a guy in Betts that's going to require a lot of attention, but if you treat that well, if you give Betts the attention that he's going to need to be on a football field, again, as you said, Kraynak, you got a 4- or 5-star talent, a guy that can be a game changer. That's going to be the first real big test of Coach McGuire, 24 years old. Okay, how are you going to handle this situation? I think that's where you go earn your paycheck if you're a guy like Garrett McGuire. So much has been said. You know what? He doesn't carry himself like a 24-year-old. He carries himself like he's more mature. He's got energy. He's a grinder. Prove it. What are you going to do with a guy like Zavier Betts?
Well, and you're going to have a chance for McGuire also, but also Coach Rule. I mean, he's going to be hands-on on this because he does really care about his players. I mean, that's been underlined multiple times by everyone we've heard talk about the guy. Mark Kraynak is in. Elijah Herbel with us. Chris Schmidt, weekend edition of Hail Varsity. Timeout, rewind coming up. What Sirles think of Walter Rouse? Nebraska landing a big-time offensive tackle in the portal. We talk NFL weekend, our rewind segment with Husker standout Jeremiah Sirles on the way. It's Hail Varsity Weekend. We're presented by Currency.
Now back with Hail Varsity Radio with Chris Schmidt and Mark Kraynak.
Back with you, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. We welcome in our favorite Husker NFLer and a few of his teams in the postseason this weekend. Jeremiah Sirles with us. Find him on Twitter at Sirles71_HSKR. Sirles, have you stopped by the roadside and inhaled the fresh air of Iowa? You're road tripping right now, am I right?
Yes, I'm on my way back home from Minnesota. I've been up here all week working with some clients up here at the gym that we have, O-linemen. So good to be back home for a little bit. This is my busy time of year, so anytime I can get it home, I will, and I can't get out of Iowa quick enough.
Now,
so
Sirles,
we're cruising.
You're sure none of these clients have any eligibility left? Maybe withdraw their name from the draft, go to the transfer portal, convince them to go to Nebraska. Is that possible here?
No, absolutely not. They're all going to the NFL. I will say I'm a huge fan of Walter Rouse. I've been recruiting him for 2 years for the agency. Could not be more excited that he is a Husker.
Tell me more from your eyes to the Husker fans' ears. Tackle to tackle, what do you love about him?
Yeah, so Walter's another guy. First of all, he's incredibly smart, obviously. He went to Stanford. I'm pretty sure he's going to be a mechanical engineer. So incredibly smart human being. I also love the fact that he's like 21 years old. He's super young, so he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on the body. But at the same time, he's been a multi-year starter at Stanford. He's a Stanford O-lineman. He's a road grader. But this year, he took a huge jump in his pass protection. And anytime you talk about a left tackle, especially someone that's going to possibly go to the league, pass protection is key. He had a really high grade coming out of Stanford this year, but wanted to go back for one more year. So he's got one more year under his belt, transferred for the Big Ten. I think he's going to be a major upgrade for us at left tackle.
Talk to me about some of the options Coach Raiola has. A lot of guys who've played ball. Some have been injured. Some are trying to find their best football.
Yeah, I think obviously you got a guy in Walter you want to put at left tackle. Now you got a guy at Teddy Prohaska. The question's kind of like, now what? But our tackles have been a bit of our weak spot. I think maybe we could get Teddy to move over to right. Do his thing over there. You got Turner now. You can maybe move back inside. You get Nuri back. So you're getting pieces back, and I think that's part of why Raiola was retained on the staff. He knows these guys. He knows them inside and out, and then the ability to go land some big portal guys, too, to help bolster that depth, that offensive line. He finally has some options. I think last year we didn't have depth. We didn't have options. When things weren't going great, we didn't have somewhere to turn of, like, this guy will fix us. But now we seem like we have some options, and guys will have some competition and go through spring ball, go through training camp, and find the best five.
Do you believe what Matt Rule and Satterfield say whenever they say they think the offensive line can be a strength of the team next year? It'd be a far cry from last year where they're probably the biggest weakness on the team and only a couple transfer portal additions. Do you truly believe they could be a strength of the team next year?
As a wise man once said, we'll see. I'm not sold on that. I don't like getting sold on, they're going to be a strength of the team when it's an unproven group. I think you can say an offensive line is going to be the strength of your football team when you've got a proven group that's been together a long time, done it at a high level a long time, won games because of the offensive line. That's when I can say strength of a team. Now, does that mean that they can't work their way into that? Absolutely not. But I'm not ready to say, wow, look at what these guys can do on paper when I haven't seen them do it between the white lines.
Jeremiah Sirles is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Sirles, a lot of Husker fans getting higher on this offensive line because of the additions of Walter Rouse and Ben Scott. Whenever you look at those two, do you think those two guys are Big Ten ready right away? Or do you think there's going to be some work they need to put in over the next couple of months to get their bodies right for the Big Ten coming over from the Pac-12?
Yeah, obviously the Pac-12's trash, so they definitely have to make sure that they get themselves rolling a little bit more. There's a big physical nature to it. You see it happen with, as much as Ochaun Mathis had a bit of an impact. He came from the Big 12, and he got pushed around on the run game and kind of disappeared in the pass game, So it is just a different style of play in the Big Ten. It's a grind it out. It's cold. It's making sure that you can go out there and execute, on a down-by-down basis when you're running the ball over and over again, But I think of a guy like Walter specifically, he comes from a Stanford program that, they don't shy away from running the football. If there's a physical team in the Pac-12, it's Stanford and Utah. So I don't think he'll have a huge adjustment coming to here and what we do. And so, I think there's slight adjustments, but both those guys have played a lot of football. It's not going to take long for them to be able to get adjusted and get to the style of play that we're going to want.
Jeremiah Sirles spending time with us, Hail Varsity Radio, NFL Weekend. We'll get there. Overall, your takeaway with Coach Rule right now, from recruiting to staff to communication, just your observations, your feel as a former Husker.
I think he's killing it. I think he's killing it. He's doing all the right things. He's talking to the right people. He's recruiting the right type of players. And, he's being transparent. I think that's a big thing of transparency of what he wants to do and then showing with his words, with his actions. And, it all sounds great and it's all doing the right things. And at the end of the day, I hope it all comes to fruition in September, because that's when you'll be judge, jury, executioner comes during the season. As we all see, but at the moment, I think he's absolutely crushing it, and he's gotten me really excited for this Husker football season.
Is it a different excitement? You've been through the merry-go-round with the rest of us, and then you were, really loyal, and you should be, to a guy like Bo. So you've seen this from a player's perspective, this turnstile of coaches.
Yeah, and when I say excitement, I mean excitement as I'm excited to see what it looks like. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying excitement of, we're going to win 10 games next year. I think there's a different level of excitement. My excitement is like, okay, things have changed. We have new faces. We have new players. I'm excited to see what this team looks like. I'm not going to ready to anoint them kings by any means, and no one should. But I think there's a definite realistic, and everyone should be excited of the possibility and the potential of what we can see, no more, no less.
Jeremiah Sirles is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And when you talk about potential, Sirles, where do you think this team has potential right now as it stands for next year? I'm not talking down the road, but next year specifically, where do they have potential to be able to do things well?
Yeah, I think the potential for this is just to continue to grow off some of the offensive success we had this year. At times it looked great, at times it looked awful, but the thing of the potential to grow in that, have some other new options. You lose Trey Palmer, but you got some more options at receiver now. And then on defense, the potential of just a whole new scheme and what that can look like. There's the potential of it going really well and potential going really bad. But there's still potential on that side. And, defenses win championships. I'm not a huge fan of the 3-3-5, but if you can make it work and you can plug it in there and do the things you need to do, it can be very effective, So I think potential to have some wrinkles on defense that are great, and then just to keep growing on the offensive side of the ball.
So let's talk 3-3-5 for a second. You mentioned the fact that you don't quite like it, but during bowl season, we saw a lot of 3-3-5 defenses have success against their opponents, and I specifically look at TCU against Michigan. I know they still let Michigan put up 45 points, but they got the win at the end of the day, and they forced Michigan to do some things that they weren't as comfortable with. So what's your hesitation with the 3-3-5?
Anytime you only have 6 big bodies on the field, I get nervous. I get very nervous, especially when you're talking about teams that run the ball like crazy. And a lot of guys that play the 3-3-5, it's really to get turnovers, to get interceptions. I don't think the 3-2-5 was created to stop the run, to stop in Iowa, to stop in Minnesota, to stop in Illinois that's going to play 12, 21 big personnel. It was created for the Big 12 and the Pac-12 to, when you're defending the pass over and over again, and then you're just going to rely on your 6 big guys to be able to stop the occasional run in there. So there's pros and cons to the 3-3-5. You get a lot of guys that can run and athletic ability to cover the edges, but I just feel like at times it really leaves you really susceptible to inside run and big bodies and getting double teams and getting creases, which is why I'm just not a huge fan, which is what you saw Georgia do to TCU, was they just beat them up front, and then you really have no answer if that's your base scheme.
Sirles, NFL we go, and you get to pick one. Who's top of your list for quarterback power rankings in the playoffs?
Easy. Josh Allen. All day, every day.
Sporting News has him number 3, my friend.
Good for them. When he's holding the Lombardi at the end of the day, we'll see.
Did the Bills have Super Bowl potential in your mind, Sirles, whenever you look at this? They have to go through the Chiefs in the AFC, and the Buffalo Bills in recent weeks haven't quite looked like themselves, but they do have the what should I call it? The motivation following the Damar Hamlin injury. That's a good word to use, Sirles.
Yeah, no, trust me, I love the Bills. Obviously, I'm slightly biased, but they still have to get through Cincinnati. And I'm not writing off Cincinnati by any means. I love the teams in the AFC. I think the Dolphins are going to get beat. I think the Chargers might be able to do some noise. But overall, it's Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincy, and any three of those teams have Super Bowl potential, in my opinion. I think the Bills need to figure out some stuff on defense, but that offense can keep you in any game.
Totally agree with the offense. Jeremiah Sirles with us. So let's flip it around to the NFC. What's your best outlook for your Vikings? Captain Kirk behind center. I know you're not a Philly guy, but, man, they've looked good. And then, of course, San Francisco is a big-time concern for everyone else in the NFC.
Yeah, I've planted the flag on my Minneapolis podcast and everything I do. I don't think the Vikings win this weekend, personally. I think that they've had too many issues, and everyone's like, yeah, they're a 3-seed. Yeah, I don't believe in them a ton. And I think it's a two-man race between Philly and San Francisco. And right now I give the slight edge to San Francisco just because they got Deebo Samuel back. I mean, that offense is the most quarterback-friendly offense in the NFL, and Brock Purdy's operating it at a very high level, even though he is just a little guy. But you put Jalen Hurts back behind center, get him comfortable. I know he didn't look great last week, but their defense is also scary. The NFC defenses are what are going to carry them to the Super Bowl, and really what ultimately could help them win a Super Bowl. And because either one of those offenses can get hot and score a lot of points, but it's the defense that's going to really win it for the NFC.
With Philly, not only do they have your teammate Linville Joseph, but your other former teammate Ndamukong Suh, and those guys are coming off the bench.
Yeah, their twos on defense on Philly are starters on half of the NFL teams. And that's what makes Philly so scary. You talk about guys like Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox. And, they lost Marquez Sweat, but, they have so many options of how they want to rush, who they want to rush, and keeping their rushers fresh that, that is a really, really tough front to have to do anything into, run or pass.
Sirles, last thought, a George Kittle story. You and Georgie trade friendly barbs on Twitter quite often.
Yes, I love Georgie. He is a special cat. My favorite George story is, I called him this year and he didn't answer after the Iowa game. He never does. But I called him, and he didn't answer, and then he just tweeted me back, and he was just like, I'm down bad, man. And it was just good because, it's fun. I always wondered with those guys, because we haven't had a chance to poke back and forth. I've been taking a lot of the jabs. That, it's just fun to know that rivalry still means something to all of us. So it still matters for guys like George Kittle and myself, everyone involved. So it's just fun to poke back and fun with that guy, and he's a madman.
Jeremiah Sirles with us, standout Husker, longtime NFLer, sports agent. And Sirles, safe travels back, bud. We'll get a beer soon, and thanks for the time today.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys. Have a good one. Go Big Red.
The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Back with you, it's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Weekend, presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel. And we are efforting Brandon Vogel as we'll get Vogues locked in. Numbers to join us this second hour at 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Plenty of recruiting news to get into as Nebraska all over the state and making a trip down to Arizona with one Dylan Raiola. See where that can take Nebraska. Also, Kraynak and Elijah. Nebraska keeping track of a couple potential Bulldogs that are in the portal, an outside linebacker and a tight end. We'll see where that goes. And, of course, we've spent a lot of time here the last part of Hour 1 talking about what the future holds for one Zavier Betts and Nebraska football. Can email the show, as always, Chris at HailVarsity.com. Brandon Vogel in just a moment. And we'll spend time with Gary Sharp, the Iron Horse, around 8:30 or so. So it's weird to have no football. I mean, NFL action, yes, but college football's finally wrapped up, and it's been a whirlwind season. We managing editor with HailVarsity.com and magazine, Brandon L. Vogel. hunker down in this football office. Vogue's been a pretty good week for Nebraska as we put a bow on the college football season with Georgia flexing once again. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're good. Thoughts with Nebraska as it pertains to just their movement this week? Friday, the floodgates opened in-state and out-of-state with visiting different prospects, and also, winter conditioning on the doorstep here this upcoming week.
Yeah, pretty strong start to the week. I mean, you see the flood of social media posts and local high school coaches talking about the last time a Nebraska coach had stopped by, which is always one of those things that I think fans like to see, but also hate to see because it prompts some questions. So it goes. The transfer addition of Walter Rouse this week, I think it's pretty big for Nebraska. So all in all, it's always the honeymoon period with a new coaching staff, particularly this early. But things do seem to be going pretty well for the Huskers.
Brandon, listener on the stream, Dion, writes that, I hope Rule knows what he's doing about Betts. Personally, I wouldn't take Betts back. I won't trust him. Fair, considering that Betts just sort of bounced, right? He just left. But why would you take him back? And what is your understanding of, how Betts was in the locker room or not? Like, would you equate him to like Maurice Washington, who is sort of, from what you hear, kind of toxic within the locker room? Would you put Betts in that category, or why would you take him back?
I mean, I think you take him back. Well, it's college football, and obviously he's a talented player. So let's not pretend that that's not part of the math here. It is, but you have a player who I think struggled a little bit to not adapt to the college game. I mean, he was perfectly good in spurts when we saw him, but I think adapt to try to figure out exactly what it is he's passionate about and what he wants to do. And you always got the sense with him, at least I did, that he was a very good football player, which maybe wasn't his kind of life's ambition at the moment. And, and he's a young guy and he spent some time without the game and outside of the stadium. And the fact that he wants back in, I think, tells you that football has remained part of his life. And for Rule's sake, in addition to just the talent, I think there's also the give a guy a chance, try to help a kid out who I think, in some of his statements showed he was just struggling with some things. So I think there's also part of that. And as an in-state kid, as you try to build this relationship with in-state coaches, there's some benefit to be had that way as well.
But Brandon, the talent speaks for itself. Is it fair to say that, I mean, if he picks up where he left off at Nebraska, he probably steps into the wide receiver room as the most talented guy in there, just based on pure athletic ability and what he can do in a football field. He can just do things that a lot of other athletes can't do. It's a similar story with a guy like Malachi Coleman. You look at that and you just go, purely based on athletic ability, there's a lot to work with. I'd say the same about Betts. Do you think he steps in as being maybe not the best guy in the room, but the most talented guy in the room, if you follow me?
Yeah. I think in terms of physical talent, he's right up there. We'll see how some of these younger players who are on the roster who have been around for a season or two kind of continue to develop. I mean, I look at the season that Marcus Washington had for Nebraska, and I thought it was really strong from him. I didn't know exactly what to expect for him coming from Texas. Didn't have a whole lot of expectations, and I think he exceeded most of those. I think that's a player you can kind of build around. But in terms of like sheer talent, physical and athletic ability, Betts certainly ranks up there, and specifically in the speed category.
Brandon Vogel with us here on Hail Varsity Weekend at Brandon L. Vogel. On Twitter is where you find him. Wide receiver is one area of need. Nebraska portaling there already with a guy who's played a lot of college football in the Virginia transfer. And
Kemp?
One more time.
Kemp?
Kemp, yeah. Kemp is where I was reaching. My mind not working as quickly as it needs to this morning. But Kemp, with the punt return and then that slot ability at 5'9", that's a body type you want. You've got Alante. You mentioned Washington. You figure out where Betts can maybe work into the equation if all things proceed. And then tight end room. Let's go there because Vokalek off to the NFL. Austin Allen's been in the league for a year. You've got some young guys, and I think of a guy like Carney, Borkacher, Rollins, of course. Chancellor's gone. So you need to either have some guys that haven't seen a lot of field time, aside from Borkacher, step up, or you can go portal again. And, Nebraska has a chance here to maybe make a pretty good impression with the Georgia tight end that may find his way. And he's stuck behind Elijah's favorite tight end in college football.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about kind of additions that, maybe technically you already had in Betts. I mean, technically had is less the case here, but Thomas Fidone, it'd be nice to see him healthy for a full.
That's a name that's probably pretty
season.
Obvious. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of what Nebraska has on the roster, like that one, in terms of talent, physical ability, I think probably isn't close. I mean, Thomas Fidone was ranked ahead, I think, of in that recruiting class of Elijah's current favorite tight end. So tells you at least where that was at coming out of high school. I mean, I think that's vital. You look at Borgter and what he did over the season. He kind of is the steadiest one I think you've got, but that one's pretty interesting, and that's an area that I think now that Nebraska has addressed some things on the O-line, there's not much time left in this portal window, but in the one post-spring, if Nebraska doesn't make an addition, we'll see how that tight end room looks in the spring, because that's a spot where I could certainly see Nebraska trying to add a little bit of experience.
Seether is the player I'm talking about, Kraynak and Voges and Elijah that was in town last night.
Yep. Yeah, and Georgia's scraps will do just fine.
Well, speaking of Georgia scraps, Voges, MJ Sherman seems to be another potential option for Nebraska, an edge rusher / outside linebacker, another guy who, saw the field sparingly at Georgia, but was very talented coming out of high school and just stuck behind some NFL guys. So what's your take on Sherman? Is Nebraska got potential there to land a guy in Sherman? What can Sherman bring to the football field?
I think they'll have a shot. He was obviously with Dan Lanning at Georgia, who's currently at Oregon. You immediately kind of jump to, well, that's probably somebody to watch out for. I haven't seen if Oregon's officially expressed any interest yet or not. I presume they will. I like him quite a bit, and I'm somebody who I get a little hesitant with. I think our default setting with these players that come from Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, et cetera, is like, well, they weren't playing a ton, but look at all the talent, which can be true. And in this case, I think it was. And the thing that impressed me about him is he really made a contribution on special teams. Like, a former, you don't take that for granted with former 5-star guys, because he came in at a similar level to a lot of those Georgia players that were ahead of him, and they just ended up ahead of him. So, but the fact that he was a kind of key contributor, I think Kirby Smart even called out specifically his contributions on special teams, leaves me with a pretty good feeling about him as a player, as a potential player at Nebraska.
Yeah, if you're sitting behind a couple first-rounders, but you're a third-rounder, that's fine. Okay, sure. We'll take that. All right, so let's look at the state of Texas. And I think we knew Matt Rule would come in and prioritize it given his history at Baylor. But I think they've taken it kind of to another level here. Let's kind of recap. You got receivers coach Garrett McGuire, son of Joey McGuire, who was a Texas high school coaching legend and now at Texas Tech, of course. You have this Dr. Elza, who is kind of like the president of the equivalent of the NSAA here, from what I can gather. So obviously connected to literally every high school's athletic department in the entire state. She's going to be joining as like a chief of staff. And then you also have Bob Wager, who was a coach of a prominent high school program in Texas and also the president of the football coaches. So obviously another connected guy. Brandon, I'm bringing all this up because I'm just trying to think, like, I don't think there's a comp in Nebraska's history where, look, everybody says they're going to recruit X area or Y area, but that is Nebraska, like, firmly planting a flag right the hell in the middle of that state. It's kind of jumped the shark in that way, don't you think, given the people that they're bringing in?
Yeah. So when I saw the administrative edition yesterday, like, I was like, if Texas A&M had fired Jimbo Fisher and Matt Rule went there and made those hires that we're just talking about, like, they'd be ecstatic because it's a clear kind of offensive move into the state of Texas, which is interesting, to the point where I was like, there have been moments where I'm like, oh, Texas again for Nebraska. So they're clearly trying to plant a flag. I think that's the right term for it there, which is interesting. I've never been somebody who kind of has looked at Nebraska's fortunes since it joined the Big Ten and thought, well, losing that direct connection to Texas was one of my first 2 or 3 reasons Nebraska's fall has happened a little bit. But I think when you look at programs in Nebraska's kind of region, a lot of them they got to have a direct connection somewhere to one of those recruiting hotbeds. And if it's going to be Texas for Nebraska, and they can pull it off with these connections that they've sort of strategically made, great. Some of those great Indiana teams, well, not great, but the strong Indiana teams of 2019 or 2020 and 2021 really hit Florida hard. I think Minnesota is a program that tends to have a ton of connections and a ton of players from Florida. So you're going to need one of those. It's like the old NCAA football game. You got to create those pipeline states, right? You got to have one. You got to have Florida. You got to have Georgia. You got to have Texas. Maybe less so California in today's football. But with this staff, I think it's pretty clear where they're hoping to make that kind of fertile recruiting ground, and it's the state of Texas.
Vogel, really fast. I mean, not to jump ahead of you, but I have a good NCAA football question here that's been on my mind. If you're looking ahead to the class of 2024, and in the NCAA football game, you can go in and create a recruit. You make him from your backyard. You make him a 5-star, a guy that's going to come in and change your program. You could do that if you want to. If you could do that for Nebraska, give me the archetype of player you would create that you think would help Nebraska in 2024, or is that player just Dylan Raiola?
It might just be Dylan Raiola. I might take all his attributes, make him Brandon Vogel Jr. from Hemingford, Nebraska, give us a little bit better. I mean, you've already got the legacy connection. I think we'll see. There could be a long way to go with that one. But we've obviously got the strong Husker connections there in a couple of different ways. So he may effectively be an in-state recruit, but if he's not, I'll duplicate him, make him my progeny, and put him in-state just as a backup option.
Love that.
Hemingford is yes. We got to get the Hemingford T-shirt going here next weekend, Vogues. More shout-outs. I love it. But I like when we were listening to Coach Barthel earlier this week, he referenced his backstory a bit on the East Coast, clearly, but not only being at Penn State and in the Big Ten for a time, so knowing the East Coast, that corridor, but also being at Bergen. I mean, that's another pipeline. And look at all of the reach Nebraska has, not only to Kraynak's point and what you've echoed, that planting in Texas, but also the ability to go East Coast. And to me, that adds up, guys. When you look back, Nebraska's most successful teams started at home, kept players at home, and a lot of the O-line was homegrown, and you had homegrown defensive linemen as well. And then you'd kind of zoom out to that 500-mile radius, and you'd grab from Kansas City, or you'd go hit Missouri hard. It's just felt like Nebraska's not had a stable second home for quite a while. Clearly that
can become Texas, and I think it can become New Jersey again. And not that you don't go West Coast, but man, or pay attention to Florida either, because I think Nebraska's done that well. But tell me a little bit here about the value, Vogues, with the East Coast, and can Nebraska, if Texas is going to be 1, can Jersey or should Jersey be 1A?
I don't know if it should be 1A. Nebraska should probably be 1A, though. If we're removing that from the conversation,
that's the starting point. Is Nebraska, yeah.
Right? It's not. It's 0. It's a given. I get it. The thing that's interesting about the East Coast to me is, I think there's opportunities to get players who are a little bit undervalued and probably under-recruited for a couple of reasons. You know, we look at Texas, high school football in Texas or Georgia, and it really is kind of a religion, and it's, you know, covered to a big degree. Now, you know, I wasn't on the Eastern Seaboard that far south, but I did live on the East Coast for quite a while, and it's not that high school football is not important, but it feels more like an activity than a religion. Team that's done really well out there lately, I think, is Michigan. Hired Biff Poggi, kind of an instrumental guy who's now the head coach at Charlotte. Had, you know, a successful high school coach out there. Nebraska has those connections. It's not that you're going to fill your classes from that region year in and year out, I think, but I do think there's value to be had, because less so with kind of the Maryland, Virginia area, but you get up into Philadelphia, New York, et cetera. Unless you're talking Penn State, or if the Michigan connection kind of remains now that Poggi is gone, where's the natural place for a player that's that like Big Ten level to go? I mean, you've got Syracuse, you've got Boston College that are, you know, really up north, but it's kind of an open ground. And with the number of connections this staff has, you know, even greater than the ones they've gone out and sought to make Texas directly connected, I think Nebraska has an opportunity to do really well there. And it matches up with, I think, how they like to recruit anyway. They like the guy that they're going to be the first offer on. They like the guy that's not getting the attention. That probably happens in the East Coast guys more often than not.
You know, and Walter Rouse, the transfer that Nebraska just landed from Stanford, he hails from Baltimore, right? So he's on that Eastern Seaboard, and Nebraska taps into him. I want to really quick jump into there, and then how you sort of cross-reference that with spring ball. You're not going to have Casey Thompson this spring as he recovers from injury. Walter Rouse, the presumed, I mean, I think you pencil him in at left tackle, or right, depending on how well Prohaska comes back. But I guess I'm wondering, what do you see as that impact on the offensive line? If you pencil, is like Prohaska and Rouse are probably your tackles. So where does that leave Bernard and Corcoran? And then 2, just spring ball in general this year. Man, I don't think it's going to be a really good preview of what you're actually going to see in the fall, just given these really big pieces, and Thompson and Rouse aren't going to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I less worry about Rouse, because I think given you have players that you were really high on at the time they were recruited and are still, you know, they've got good experience, but they've still got multiple years of eligibility left. Like, I don't think anyone's throwing out anything with those guys. You hope you can build some depth there. Spring becomes important, but Rouse, given the amount of football he played, like I don't think you miss his absence as much as maybe you do Casey Thompson, you know, with a transition to a new offensive style and scheme. I should say, like, based on everything we've heard about Casey Thompson and his kind of work ethic, like, football seems to be about all he does, even in his free time. Like, I'm not worried about him picking it up. But you're going to run that entire spring with the quarterback who I don't think, unless Sims really kind of blows it out of the water with a new setting, you're not going to have your starter. So you got to find a way to make that valuable and get a pretty deep quarterback room as it currently stands. make those snaps valuable and hopefully get a guy ready. And if somebody kind of rises up through the spring, somebody like Sims, presumably, to really challenge for that starting spot, well, you can figure that out in the offseason.
Brandon Vogel's with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Vogues, before we get you out, a new Black Shirts logo has been making the rounds on social media. Mixed reviews is what it's been greeted with. I want to get your take on the logo, and also, have you been able to confirm, is this the legit new logo for the Black Shirts? Because that's a big change from years and years of tradition with this old logo for them to change it now, and I think it may put some question marks around Trev Albert's tenure at Nebraska as AD if he okayed that.
That's true. He's bringing back, he said he's bringing back old Herbie, and now he's ditching the classic Black Shirts. Well, we got to get this guy out of here. I can't stand that. No, Trev's doing a great job. I haven't confirmed myself that it is legit, but a well-placed source did tell us that it probably is. So I don't think it's internet fakery. The only Black Shirts logo, which, I did a big story on this multiple years ago about the guy who created it, just a screen printer in Omaha. It actually debuted in the early 80s and was based, I think the university took over that mark in the early 90s. It was clearly something that was kind of handmade. It did, you look at the new one, it's got a new helmet on it. It's got some accents, some bevels, like all of the new stuff when you update a logo that you do to it. So I don't dislike the new one by any means, but it does lack a little of the kind of homegrown charm I've always found with the classic one.
And look, in branding sort of terms, it's more of a refresh than it is like a new logo, right? I mean, it's not, you have to have a pretty discerning eye to see the stark differences. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not like all of a sudden it's a pink skull or something, I thought it did a pretty good job. I thought it did a pretty good job of honoring the original and just kind of updating it a touch.
Well, yeah, I can tell you from having done that story how the original logo, I'll do this quickly, sorry, how that original logo came. Dr. Tim Riley, who ran a screen printing business, was the originator of that. And he literally, in those days, you basically kind of traced logos from books, and he found an anatomy book. That's where that skull comes from. That's where those bones come from. So those are kind of the origins of that.
Huh.
And then I believe there was something with, was it Boyd Epley who saw the logo at a game and bought himself a shirt or something like that? You can correct me if I'm wrong here.
What I recall was Riley took that T-shirt. So he put this out and unveiled it at one of those games. I'm forgetting the year exactly, maybe 85, against Florida State. Made a handmade banner, took it and unfurled it, and that was kind of its debut. And he did just call up Tom Osborne. Was like, "Hey, I have this thing. People seem to really like it. Do you want to use it?" And I think Coach Osborne was kind of like, "Yeah, that's fine." So those are some of the loose origins of that.
Brandon Vogel with us, HailVarsity.com magazine. And be sure to get your subscription today to both the magazine and, of course, the digital package. Great coverage with the Hail Varsity staff. HailVarsity.com/offer is how you get that hookup. Bogues, what's happening with Hail Varsity this weekend? And tell us a little bit here about the new mag.
Yeah, we got a big women's basketball game today, of course. But the January issue goes to print early next week. So that'll be on its way for subscribers. If you're not, get in now. Brady Oltmans, our lead football writer, has a great story just kind of looking at Nebraska recruiting since this new staff has arrived. I'm currently working on looking at kind of the footprints of both of these coordinators, offense and defense, what they've done well at their previous stops, some things that were maybe, weaknesses. Every offense and defense is going to have both of those. So if you're looking for a little bit better understanding, I think, of where these offenses have been good and where they've maybe had some weaknesses, that'll be in there as well. Got a great legend story from Mike Babcock on MJ Knighton, former Husker softball player who's now the head coach at University of San Diego. A pretty important hire for the University of San Diego. So a lot of good stuff. Still time to get in and get that January issue if you're not a subscriber.
That is awesome. Vogues, have yourself a weekend, bud. Thanks for jumping on with us.
Thanks, guys.
There he is, Brandon Vogel. Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel. Quick timeout as we work through a weekend edition of Hail Varsity and the Iron Horse. In the on-deck circle, Gary Sharp with us. It's Hail Varsity. We're presented by Currency.
Glad to have you back.
Yes, sir. You heard me right.
Here are the guys, Schmidt and Kraynak.
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're going to bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7.5 minutes after that, you're going to bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that every 5 minutes until one of us passes out.
Excellent strategy, sir.
Winding down this Saturday edition, weekend edition of Hail Varsity, presented by Currency. Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. We welcome in the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, with us. Sharpie, good morning. Thanks for a few minutes. How we doing?
Hey, good morning, guys. I got my coffee and I got my favorite threesome in the morning.
You know, that's a you problem, but we appreciate you. We appreciate you. There's a lot of different directions to go. I'm not going to get into to choice, but I will. I will start off with the portal. Let's go there, and a lot of different news items to get into, but. Rouse, I want to get your take. You've covered Nebraska football a number of years, man, and portal is kind of a new normal, but Nebraska, it looks like on paper, landed a really, really talented guy that can help bolster the offensive line.
Yeah, you're in a situation on the offensive line because of some missteps in terms of recruiting and developing that you have to go portal. And I'm a big get high school offensive linemen, develop them, because offensive linemen appear to be a crapshoot when it comes to the portal. Some of the best that are in the portal, you wonder why are they there, and then they end up going to the upper echelon teams of college football. But in this case, I think this was a priority for Nebraska. Somebody they saw that's played a lot of football that you could put in at one of the tackle spots, maybe left tackle, maybe right tackle. He's been told that left tackle is the place for him. But I think it stabilizes something because he's played a lot of football, and I like his hand placement. He's very adept in the run game. And if this is a priority, and in the day before Nebraska loses a guy that probably would have been one of your starting interior linemen to Florida, was this an NIL? And if it was, that's okay, because the NIL is in place to, if you want somebody and they're a priority, you go get them. You don't overspend, but you make a package worthwhile in selling, hey, this is what we can do for you. This is what you can do for us. Are we a match? And I think in this case, Nebraska got a victory. I mean, this is something, if you think about it, guys, let's say that Teddy Prohaska, who, we're still kind of waiting on. There's all kinds of possibilities, and his ceiling is high, but he's got to stay healthy. You could realistically sit here today and go, man, Nebraska's got 4 of their 5 offensive line spots figured out, and I didn't think we'd be in a position to say that. So it's a win for Nebraska getting a guy like Walter Rouse to come in and be able to step in and get going once he's healthy for camp next fall.
Kraynak, you're mute, bud.
I got him off mute. We're good now. We're good.
God, Elijah.
May have been a me problem.
Behavior there, Yeah.
I didn't want any hot mic moments during the commercial break. That may have been a me problem.
It's fair. It's fair. Offensive line, just walk with me here. So, and you mentioned the word match. Is it conceivable that part of Nebraska's problem on the offensive line was, okay, you rewind to 2021, you had Frost and Austin that clearly had some conflict in terms of what they wanted to do with the offensive line and what they wanted to do with the offense. You fast forward to 2022, you bring in a new guy, Raiola, and then you also bring in Whipple, and then you also have Frost. And those 3 guys weren't on the same page either. And so really at the brunt of that, is the offensive line. Like, while everybody above them is trying to figure it out and try to sort it out, they're the dudes that have to sort it out within a couple seconds on every single play on the field. And just truly, we're not put in a great position. Do you think that is a reasonable assessment of maybe what's been going on? And as you go forward now, the fact that they'll all be on the same page, Satterfield, Raiola, Rule, will benefit the offensive line, and maybe we could expect to see a better performance because they were pretty bad last couple of years.
Absolutely. Now, then it becomes on the player to play up to your abilities. But there's a big thing about everybody being aligned. And, you're absolutely right. I mean, Scott and Greg, for some reason, got sideways, and they never able to replace it. And it had a direct effect on the offensive linemen in that room. Last year was the same way. I don't know that there was a lot of respect for Donovan Raiola coming into the situation that he did. And let's be honest, he's coming into a situation where the offensive lineman has underperformed, and you got a brand new first-time coach with a veteran offensive coordinator and a coach that's trying to keep his job. And so it was discombobulated from the start. We're all kind of waiting to see if that's the difference, and if there's if there's going to be a flip of some guys that we've been waiting on, a Benhart and a Corcoran. And even though, I thought Benhart, especially pass pro, got better towards the tail end of the season, I think another thing about the offensive line, and you're kind of hearing it, is more assistants talk about Donovan Raiola and kind of how they feel about him and why he was retained, is quite simply, you've got the head coach who is not afraid to go down and get involved in the offensive line and to get his hands dirty. And he's put himself out there about where this offensive line is going. And I believe also that will benefit this offensive line is they are speaking about controlling the line of scrimmage, and I truly believe that's what they want to do. Instead of just saying, yeah, that's what you're supposed to say when you're in the Big Ten and you're playing in the West Division and you're a place like Nebraska is we want to win the line of scrimmage. I believe these guys have an intent on doing that. And you look at how they've recruited, especially in the portal. They've been aggressive with offensive linemen. So they're going to make sure that the offensive line is good and that Donovan Raiola has a chance to kind of hit the reset button. But I will tell you, one thing that really stood out to me over the course of the last month and how our opinion on Donovan Raiola has changed, it's players came to his defense. And we had not heard that during the season. But and a lot of them hadn't talked about it, and there were other pressing issues. But the offensive lineman coming to the forefront and saying, hey, Donovan Raiola can be a really, really good position coach is something I was not expecting. So that also gives me a little bit of hope going into 23.
Gary Sharp's with us here, a Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Gary, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I don't think I need to overcomplicate it. Zavier Betts reportedly coming back to Nebraska. Your reaction is what?
If he is engaged and he's ready to go and he's focused and he can do Monday through Friday that gets him to Saturday, he's a Sunday guy. It was a situation where they invested a lot in him last spring, and it just wasn't for him. He had lost the desire to play football. And, you get away from it and you're back living in Omaha where everybody is asking you questions and it's a what if. And then all of a sudden it's a new page in Lincoln, and he put himself in the portal just to see what Nebraska's response would be. And Nebraska's response is, we're in the talent acquisition business. If you want to play football and you are headstrong, then we can find a place for you. And I think it's a win for Nebraska. I mean, why wouldn't you, if everything is good, why wouldn't you add him to your roster? Especially, guys, we know this, even with the addition of Billy Kemp this week, that's a wide receiver room that is very, very light on experience and questions being answered. So if it's moving in the path which it is moving, and they get it finalized, then it's good for Zavier as well, because I think he got away and realized that, you know what, I can get a degree, I can play football. That's what I want to do, and if that's what he wants to do, and Nebraska's convinced, I think it's a good restart for him at Nebraska.
Sharpie, speak a moment to just the management on both ends, right? On Betts, if he comes back, what will be expected of him, and I guess, a second crack at it academically and athletically, but also the new voice, the new head man in Rule, and how what you've kind of gathered from Rule's personality and management style, how that can help benefit Betts.
Well, I think there's no BS. There's no Mickey Mouse show. There's no preferential treatment. You're one of 120 plus football players, And you're on this roster because we see something out of you. And I think some straight talk will, maybe this time it'll work. It's not like Nebraska, messed around and this was on Nebraska. Nebraska invested a lot in Zavier. And there were times where we wondered why he wasn't on the field. Well, if you can't trust a guy in terms of the playbook and running the right play, and you have to run something that is not super simple on a third down, you can't afford him to have him on the field. So this is a lot on Zavier. So I'm excited. If he has turned his life around and he's back focused and he can do the day-to-day stuff, I think this is a pretty good story. But this is on him to prove to everyone that he's good, he's ready to go for football, and he can help Nebraska. Because, again, there is no doubt that when he is on, in the brief little glimpses we've seen in his career, he can be a game changer. Again, he can be a Sunday guy. And we'll see if Nebraska can get him on the right path and they can keep him moving from day to day. But it'll be interesting. You're going to have a new wide receiver coach that he has absolutely no connection to that will be with him day to day. Will that room be strong enough also to help a guy like Zavier Betts get his feet back on the ground and move forward and help everybody win football games?
And Gary, I think within this conversation too is like, the demands of what it takes to play Division I football is, it's really significant. You're talking basically 6 a.m. to 9 or 10 p.m. almost daily, right? Like, that's not an exaggeration to say that. And that could burn some dudes out, right? Like, that's a serious level of commitment that you have to have. So it's not, I just, some of the comments that you're hearing from fans, just like, lazy and, that's not good for the locker room. And it's just like, I don't know if this is that much. That's really the case in this situation. I think it's like, look, this is a really demanding thing that you just have to be all in on. And if you're not, you're not. You think that's a piece of this too, is just like, he basically has to decide, like, are you ready to basically commit 6A to 10P every day to doing this?
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. And here's the other part of people that are going, well, he's not going to be, what's he going to do to the roster? You don't think in your first year, as much as you want as many talented guys on your roster, but in your first year, you don't think Matt Rule, if this moves forward and Zavier Betts is back, that Matt Rule has not vetted the heck out of Zavier Betts to get a comfortability level to say, yes, this guy has convinced me that he is all in and he's ready to become a student athlete again. I don't see that. I think they probably asked a lot of people that are not associated with Zavier, that know him a little bit, Zavier directly, to get a sense of, yep, he's good to go, so we can move forward. But, I think we understand more about the mental challenges of student athletes. We all go through our struggles, but when you are a young man or woman and you're playing collegiate athletics at a high level, there is a demand on you, and there's also the demand on you to be a student as well. And we see more people and more athletes talking openly about that struggle. I just think if Zavier has some people to guide him, and he's good, and he can turn his life around, and he can get focused, and he can get a degree and also play football, man, that's a win-win for everybody. So I'm excited to see how this works out, and excited to see what kind of shape he would be in and where he'd be at if they get him back on the football field this spring.
Gary Sharp with us, Weekend Edition, Hail Varsity Radio. Sharpie, just a couple minutes before we say goodbye, Commissioner Warren's legacy is what to you?
You won't know about it probably for a few years down the road. I think we're going to find out in a short amount of time, in 3.5 years, that's a job where how much autonomy do you have to make decisions? He didn't come across as the best communicator. We all know about the COVID year and the missteps along that way. I think it's in a tough position. I don't think when he took over the job, first of all, he's replacing a legend in Jim Delaney, and nobody ever thought, well, he's going to be here long term. And so I think that was some hesitation. And he had knocked heads with the presidents. It's a weird tenure because you have the COVID year. You also have the development of women's sports and just what we were talking about, the mental health of the student athlete, that Kevin Warren, that was so near and dear to him. And then, of course, a mega TV deal that how much did he have to do with it, or was it television executives? I think it's going to be a few years down the road before we can get a a sense in, okay, this is what Kevin Warren's tenure was at the Big Ten. But he definitely changed the fabric of college football. But it's, nobody is saying, oh, no, Big Ten is in trouble with Kevin Warren gone. They're like, okay, I have some strong feelings, time to move on. And it'll be an important hire for the Big Ten, whether they decide to stay like in the entertainment TV industry or if they go with someone that is more collegiate. Because, is that a job that you're a mouthpiece for the presidents, or is it somebody that you can be a forward thinker and kind of be Jim Delaney, where you say, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and then you tell everybody instead of people telling you what to do, and then you go and do it.
Gary Sharp with us. Sharpie, have a good week, bud. Thanks for your insight and jumping on with us this morning.
Hey, great show, guys. Have a wonderful weekend to you and all your listeners.
Appreciate you. There he is, Gary Sharp.
Appreciate you, Gary.
Kraynak, be good, brother.
You as well, man. You as well.
Elijah, thanks for everything. We'll talk to you Monday at 4 on Hail Varsity. Thanks.